So religion's not just a superfluous thing. It's the very heartbeat of what makes a society a society.
Our piety has not disappeared, it's just shifted. And so in what way are we still mythological? Hey, what up, peeps? Welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I am Troy Polidori.
And this week we're going to talk about religion and myth and scapegoating and other stuff like that pertaining to the work of Rene Girard and things like that. But don't worry, we're going to make it fun. It sounds like boring, but it's going to be sexy scapegoating, sexy archaic religion. But before then, of course, we're going to start off with Shitty Minute. So, it's my Shitty Minute. So you have to introduce the Shitty Minute.
Yeah, I mean, is this going to be sexy because you're going to do it in Girard's deep French accent?
The archaic religion. No.
All right, so the first segment in Owls at Dawn is the Shitty Minute. This is where one of us rants about whatever's grinding our gears this week. Austin, what's got you down?
Troy, this is a first for Owls at Dawn. This Shitty Minute is directed at myself. This Shitty Minute is a mea culpa. This Shitty Minute is a total and complete argument against everything that I said last week about Wonder Woman in the bullshitting segment.
So you saw it.
First, I'm sorry. I apologize. I confess my sins. However Hail Marys, how many Hail Marys I have to say in order to get right with the Mother of God, I am willing because I was wrong. Yes, I saw it. I saw it on the big screen. And, dude, it's actually pretty good. Let's just get the basic stuff out of the way. It is, of course, a, just kind of like a bullshit action superhero movie, and I'm fucking fatigued from that shit, okay? But, dude, the sort of feminist message, I think it was pretty fucking powerful. I am an idiot. I was wrong. It is not some lean-in bullshit. And, I am sorry, world. Ladies, if you listen to this, I am sorry. Men who listen to this, I am sorry. I'm an idiot. Don't judge a book by its cover. Go see Wonder Woman. I'm sorry. Mea culpa. I don't know, Troy. Sometimes you step over the line because you're trying to be philosophical and maybe a little bit humorous and tongue-in-cheek, and then you get your foot stuck in the bear trap. And I got my foot stuck in Gal Gadot's big old bear trap.
Oh, shit. I'll just pass that aside, that remark. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I haven't seen it, and I probably won't see it for a little while until it comes out on, Blu-ray or whatever. But what I heard from various reviews is that the lean-in bullshit had a lot to do with, like, what if, we had massive emphasis on war and imperialism, but a woman got to lead it. Is that not what's happening here?
I completely disagree. I think that what this film is about is it is a total fish out of water story, right? But Gal Gadot's character, Wonder Woman, Diana comes from, obviously, the community of the Amazons. She is half god herself. She's the daughter of Zeus, and one of the Amazonian, I think it's the queen, Hippolyta, and she is known as kind of like the god killer, but the idea is that the world of men, the world of humankind, it's the world of men. It's not just humankind; it's the world of mankind. And so it immediately sets up that the world of humankind is mankind, and that it is thoroughly wrought and conditioned and characterized by patriarchal dominance. And what is it that characterizes that world? It's actually going to be kind of interesting because it fits with what we're going to talk about today. But it's conflict. It's violence. It's division of labor, it's division of roles, it's broken into simple categories, but she is the pure feminine force who I think is pure embodied love and care and virtue, who rejects that world of division that the world of men is characterized and divided by. And so what she is driven by is a different dispositional logic. So she's not about strategizing in the war. So the idea that, oh, but what if it was a world of war but just a woman leader instead? No, it's not about that at all, because really what drives her ultimately is care. Now, does she use the means of conflict and battle? Sure, she does, because she's thrown into those conditions. That is who she is, right? She is a warrior, through and through. That's the way she does that. But she does it from a disposition that I think is different. And so it isn't about conflict. It isn't about vengeance. It isn't about the typical sort of reproduction of power that you get within the world of men, as they say it, or within a sort of patriarchal logical structure, but rather it's something different, and it's something totally feminine, and I think positively feminine, rather than just the lean-in feminism, which is sort of like the negative distancing of feminism, right? And so I think that it's basically that in one sense, there's obviously the Zeus myth, the Amazon myth, right? That the women were their kind of role is to bring love and things like that. But then also what ends up happening is that love and that care and that alternative notion of virtue comes in and subverts the world of men and offers something different. And then at the same time, I think in so doing that, it creates its own myth that's actually a sort of death of God myth. And there's this one great scene where she's in this trench and she goes to help this village that the world of men have rejected because it doesn't fit within their strategy. So Chris Pine's trying to get her to go to Central Intelligence or whatever the fuck it is so that they can do some strategy, because they gotta go through the typical recourse, right? They're trying to settle an armistice, and so they've got to do that because that's the way things are done. And she's like, no, you're just going to leave these women and children in this village to suffer and die? And he's like, you can't save everybody. And she's like, fuck that. So she goes and she ends up saving the village. And then at the end, what she does is she like launches up and she kills this sniper in this village that's picking people off, who's hiding in a bell tower in a church, and she destroys the steeple of the church. And so the church is destroyed, and then she emerges from the rubble standing on top of the church. And I was like, that's kind of interesting too. I don't even know that it was like necessarily intentional, but it's interesting that this half god, stands up over the symbol of Christianity as like, I have just saved you. The world of men and men's religions and men warfare and men's strategy and things like that doesn't work, but it's care and it's love embodied. So
finally, polytheism triumphs over monotheism. Its greatest foe.
Dude, that's exactly what it was, bro. It was that's exactly right. It was, and it was a particular type of feminist polytheism that triumphs, that offers something different. So Ares is the god of war who has control over the the world of men, and she comes as the other god who fights Ares, and she wants to defeat Ares so that she can release the world of men from their own repetitious cycle of vengeance and these divisions of power that are kind of embedded within that all derive from that cycle of violence and that cycle of vengeance. And there's even some shit about like her criticizing capitalism. So, I mean, it's really interesting. It kind of subtly critiques almost everything that we would think of as being a part of, what's the bell hooks litany that she says, where it's like patriarchy, capitalist, what is it?
Yeah. I forget the whole spiel, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like patriarchy, capitalist, imperialist, militaristic, whatever sort of thing, world. And so Diana is literally the opposite of that. She is a force embodied, but a force embodied that's wrapped in love or care, I think, in a sense. And so, I don't know, man. I think I was fucking wrong. I got a little moved. I got like teary-eyed and shit. Like, I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, that's not saying a whole lot with you.
Yeah, that's true. I get teary-eyed in like every movie. But really, man, I was thinking about the myth and the beauty of this myth that they were that was coming across, and it made me think about how, all storytelling is myth. I could go see fucking the new Steven Spielberg movie, and it's myth. Anytime we tell a story, we're participating in the same ontological tendencies that humans have been participating in for fucking millennia. We tell stories about our people. And in telling stories about our people, we're reproducing ideas, we're creating ideas, we're bringing different ideas together to create new ideas or new perspectives on certain ideas. And I think this serves as a very interesting myth of the feminine as sort of subverting the patriarchal dominance. And so I dug it, man. And then, of course, the other thing is, what about the sex appeal stuff, right? There's even, multiple lines of talking about how she's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. And there's this one guy who he sees her kick some ass and he says, oh, I'm both frightened and aroused. And, that gets a nice chuckle and stuff like that. But I actually think that her femininity is understood from that perspective, from those men that view that, because that's in the world of men. She's now in the world of men, and so they're subjected to the male gaze, right? They're subjected to that, so they're going to view her that way. But she's different. She doesn't think that way. She almost has a sort of innocent naivete about sexuality and about gender stereotypes and gender roles. And so I think that when that's displayed, what that's doing is that's bringing into tension two different worlds. The world of the male gaze, that even the secretary, who's the female secretary, who says what? Like, she's not the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. Even she's obviously conditioned by the male gaze because she's part of the world of men, and she's a secretary because that's the role that that's the only role she's allowed to play in the world of men. So she's even conditioned by the male gaze. So she says that, and she kind of falls into that. And then, of course, the guy that says, I'm aroused or whatever, he's also conditioned by the male gaze. But Diana's presence is confounding that. And even though she does end up, I think, banging Chris Pine. I mean, there's a scene where he closes the door behind them and kind of locks it, and so it's like they bang. What's wrong with that? That's sexuality, man. Human beings want to bang, you know? And it isn't as though, like, she's the weak one who falls for Chris Pine's charm. Matter of fact, I think it's the other way around. He's the weak one who falls for her charm. So I think that actually she is this kind of positive feminine power. I was wrong, dude. I was wrong. And I am sorry. I apologize. I confess my sins to the world. Mea motherfucking culpa.
Wait, this was PG-13, and there was interspecies sex between a god, a demigod, and a human being?
Yeah, don't worry. Christians, this isn't a violation of Jude and shit like that, and, don't worry.
This sounds like some Nephilim shit right here.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's some Nephilim shit. Don't worry. That's why this is like straight up heretical, polytheistic vindication of the many gods stuff. But yeah, so then you get some people that are like, oh, but it's just kind of like a shitty action movie. And I get it, there are certain points, but I think because I was so caught up in the myth, this new myth that I was, or this different myth that I was seeing, to me it made the battle scene have a lot more import rather than just, ooh, the good guy versus the bad guy, and they fight, and the one person wins and the one person loses. There was much more at stake because of that. And then, of course, what happens to Chris Pine, his character arc is really interesting, I think, from this position. So I think from this perspective that just caught me immediately. So of course, obviously, I might see things differently than the average 7-year-old who goes to see the Wonder Woman film. But yeah, that I think all that shit is there, and it was a really rich film. I actually thought it was really rich. I really enjoyed it. So I'm sorry, I'm an asshole, and that's all I have to say about that.
All right. I mean, I'll update you in 3 or 4 months with either a shitty minute contradicting you or a sticky leaves affirming you.
Okay. Deal.
Yeah, I mean, my only response right now is just the whole sexuality stuff was kind of a joke anyway. I don't really care about any of that. Superheroes, by their very nature, are always objectified individuals, right? They're never, obedient to social forces. They're always just objects to either emulate or to reject wholesale. So, I mean, if they're sexually that way or otherwise, it doesn't really matter. It's still the same issues there, so.
Yeah. Faux show, man.
Alright, so moving on to our main segment, we're going to be talking about Rene Girard, French theorist, and the idea of Mimetic Theory and religion. We both read some Girard and got interested in him in college a bit, given our, background in religion and stuff like that. That makes a lot of sense. How did you more recently have this pop back into your life?
Well, so you actually recommended his book, I See Satan Fall Like Lightning, when we were in undergrad. And so I read it then. And he's always, in the book, had a pretty profound influence on me coming out of an evangelical background. He's sometimes called an anthropologist. He's a literary critic,
but he's a theorist, yeah.
Yeah, so he kind of, as the way, I mean, I guess in continental theory, there's this transdisciplinarity, and so he fits as a full sort of transdisciplinarian. He's a literary critic and theorist, and I guess an anthropologist. But his perspective on scapegoating, I think, was really impactful for me because of the language of scapegoating about Jesus in Christian theology, right? So it kind of caught my attention, and it comes from a very different perspective than maybe the more conservative evangelical perspective would want to espouse. So it was very intriguing to me because he considered the development of religion, the historical development of religion. He considered anthropology, which, conservative Christians are very afraid of affirming what they would call secular anthropological ideas, because in their mind it just tries to reduce everything to a commonality, and it's based on evolutionary theory or something like that, and so they tend to kind of reject it dogmatically outright. And to me, I thought there was something interesting in his ideas, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then when I actually went to do my master's degree, in my mind, I was thinking about doing something on like Girard and Deleuze and Gianni Vattimo. And that was when I first started my MA. That was where my mind was. And then I started studying more, and I got tired of talking about religion in an explicit sense. And so I started studying just more philosophy. And so the religion kind of dwindled throughout the course of my MA. And so my thesis ultimately ended up being about kind of death of God and the possibility of religious community, quote unquote, religious communities after the death of God, but like affirming the absolute radical death of God, even more so than death of God theologians. And so I looked at like liberation theology. And then I even said that even they're a little bit too wedded to transcendence. And so I kind of tried to argue for radical, imminent notions of religious community, or the possibility of religious community with like Nietzsche and Deleuze. And so I was always kind of interested. So he's always been there. And then I randomly got like a fucking recommendation on Amazon saying, oh, based on your other selections, this book might interest you. So I was like, oh, Rene Girard. I haven't read anything about him in a while. And it was like, the title of the book was Reading the Bible with Rene Girard. And I'm working on a screenplay right now that's sort of a Jesus allegory, very loose Jesus allegory. And so, I've been interested in scripture and how we can use the Bible and how we can use the religious text and theology, Christian theology, in ways that are interesting and inventive. And so I was like, oh shoot, I'm going to go back and read some Girard. So I picked up this book and I powered through it, and it kind of like lit a fire under my ass again to make me want to kind of study anthropology of religion a little bit more.
Yeah, so you mentioned a pretty good little binary there that I think we can explore a little bit between the kind of traditional anthropology of religion and what Girard's trying to do. Now, he is a literary theorist, right? But he certainly thinks that or couches his thought as scientific anthropology. Much in the same way that, Freud wanted psychoanalysis to be scientifically grounded. Girard doesn't come from anthropology, but he thinks that his theory is anthropologically grounded. What do you think that main difference is between traditional anthropology of religion and what his bone to pick is with that, with mimetic theory? And I guess you can kind of explain what mimetic theory is a little bit in there, yeah?
So just from a methodological perspective, he's not an anthropologist because he has never gone and lived with other cultures and studied them. That is one of the most important things to understand about what an anthropologist does. Anthropologists, they have an intentional scientific approach in that they go and observe people, communities, societies. Now, there's a little bit of gravelly ground between anthropology and sociology because some people would say, well, then what's the difference between sociology? Generally speaking, anthropologists are studying indigenous peoples or people outside of urban life. But that is sort of just a generalization that doesn't always fit across all categories, because there is a guy named Marc Auger, I think it is, or Auger, Auge, who's a French anthropologist who studies contemporary information societies, and urban societies and the internet and technology and advanced technology, and wrote a book called Non-Place that's kind of interesting. So it's not an easy division, but nevertheless, the point is that Girard does not engage in field studies at all. So he looks at literary texts and he examines figures like Don Quixote or he'll read Dante's Inferno, or he will read the Bible, or he will read Shakespeare, and he will derive from that anthropological principles based on character studies, which is interesting in itself, but there is something important to understand about the characterization that is imbued into literature that reflects and that espouses material and what he believes scientific, cultural truths or anthropological truths. So that's more his methodology. So methodologically, that's probably the biggest reason that he would be kind of outside the normal bounds of anthropology of religion. From his perspective, what he sees as the difference between himself and anthropologists, and where he's actually critical of anthropologists of religion, is that he believes that anthropologists of religion have overlooked something crucial. They have overlooked the uniqueness of Christianity. That they believe that all religions and that all sacrificial religion and that all sacrificial practices sort of derive from common human desires or common human tendencies, whereas Girard sees that there's something unique about the sacrificial system in Christianity, and it can be boiled down to this. Archaic religion believes that, or they scapegoat, we'll say, which is they impute the sins of the community, so to speak, onto a person based on that person being guilty. So Rene Girard talks about Oedipus. And so you look at Greek tragedy and Greek mythology, and all of the victims were actually guilty. They deserved the ire from the community or the wrath of the gods or the punishment that befell them, right? Christianity is different for Girard because Jesus is innocent. Jesus is not guilty. Now, even if some of the people, like the Jews and the Romans at the time, thought he was guilty, like certain Pharisees thought he was guilty, they thought he was a rabble-rouser, or maybe certain anthropologists of religion would say that, no, Jesus really was a political revolutionary, and so he was violating certain Roman laws. Sure, but the biblical text and the Christian tradition is different because its God is not one that emerges out of the guilty scapegoating process, but rather is an innocent, and that's different. And so for Girard, that actually means that Jesus isn't exactly a scapegoat in the way that archaic religion has practiced scapegoating for millennia. So that's the foundational difference where he would break from anthropology of religion.
Yeah, and that's even sort of a later consequence of, I think, isn't his main sort of contention with anthropology of religion that it doesn't consider mimetic theory as its ground.
Yeah, right.
Where Girard kind of posits the idea after reading a lot of these ancient archaic religious texts and Greek tragedies and others that psychology, basically like desire, is grounded in sociology in a sense. It's grounded in others.
Right.
Everyone exists, and all of our beliefs and desires and personality and everything else comes out in relation to other people, which is not a totally radical idea. That's certainly, sociology itself kind of posits that from Durkheim to, modern day sociology. But then Girard kind of really simplifies it or narrows it down to the one idea of mimesis, which is the word that just means like copying or miming, right?
Imitation. Yeah.
And Girard's thesis is that basically all desire is not individual, it's not expressive. We don't just have natural desires that become expressed individually, but we see others having desires, and then we imitate that desire, we copy it. And that's a huge sociological problem, because there's scarce resources. And so if you just copy or imitate the desire of another, then you're going to both want the same thing. And,
Right.
Girard says that sort of natural tendency of human groups leads to, he calls it mimetic rivalry, which is basically violence. And he basically says all violence stems from this. It's a really straight line from all desire is imitation of others that leads automatically to violence. And then the scapegoat comes in, because you can't just have a society of war of all against all based on mimetic rivalry. because then you don't have a society anymore, right? It gets destroyed. It can't live on and then make histories and make books and stuff about it.
Well, for him, you don't have society at all until the scapegoat.
Yeah, this is actually how.
So, like for him, for him, what you have is like this dispersed, unbounded field of fucking rivalry, where I want that and you want that and they want that, and so we're fighting. And so what you have to do is then you have to have a scapegoat in order for there to be peace, in order for there to be society. So society emerges out of a scapegoat, which is an act of violence, so that you can quell the mimetic rivalry, which is the broader, let's say, anthropological violence.
Yeah, and so all founding myths, and Girard has a point here, because this is where he reads the myths and sees the evidence, right? Is that all these myths are always about somebody getting done murdered, right? Someone getting mapped, like they're demapped or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's usually how they work, right? Usually it's a god or whatever is the case, and the world's created. And so he sees that and says, hey, it looks like collective murder is the founding of civilization. And we all put all of our intense, violent tendencies that were based on this mimetic rivalry, and we put it on one person, and they sort of are the scapegoat. They take all the sins, all the violence of all of the people in society, and then we kill them, and then we have peace for a while. But then we have to do it again eventually, because that mimetic rivalry builds up again. And so it's like a cycle that happens over and over again. And he thinks basically this is the state of nature for all human beings, all societies, and religion is just the natural expression of this. So religion's not just a sort of a superfluous thing or some additive to society. It's the very heartbeat of what makes a society, which is also interesting, right? Because I know we both come from a perspective where we want to view religion in a materialist view. And this theory, I think, appealed to us when we first read it because of that reason, mostly.
Yeah.
It sort of tries to explain religion as this vital and necessary component, but also kind of ugly, too.
Right.
As well as, in Girard's interpretation of Christianity, the possibility of otherwise. So all those things have that natural appeal.
Yeah, and so I think maybe that's why I was drawn back to it, because if I am going to explore religion and Christianity now, sort of having gone through the Christian experience, so to speak, I think the only way I would be interested in doing so is looking at it from that materialist perspective. And so I am interested in looking at how it is that sort of sociological and anthropological tendencies have developed historically that have led to these foundational myths. And then what I'm really curious is, and now is we tend to think of ourselves as sort of living maybe in sort of like this post-Weberian disenchanted world, right, where the world is no longer imbued with myth and we aren't religious anymore. And I'm reading, Neil Gaiman's American Gods and watching his show, and I've been thinking about that quite a bit. And so I'm thinking also a lot about the ways in which actually our piety has not disappeared, it's just shifted. And so in what way are we still mythological? I just talked about Wonder Woman in my shitty minute. In what way is the movie Wonder Woman, a commercial box office Hollywood movie, in what way is that mythological in a similar sense? Not, of course, the same. I think everything is different. But in a similar sense, does it have echoes of those myths that were taught 17,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago? In what way has that mythical tendency just been reproduced under different historical contexts?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the things I like most about just the idea or sort of the form of what Girard is doing, aside from the content.
Right.
Is that it means that religion is vitally important to culture, obviously, because it literally is culture, the founding of culture. And also it means you can't get away from it. You can't be a-religious. You can say you are, and you can be or anti a certain expression of religion, right? But if you're going to be existing in a society as a person, you're going to be expressing something religious in this sense, no matter what you do. And I think that's absolutely true. And if you look around, you can analyze even contemporary American culture with all these same tools and get a lot of interesting results.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me all the time. They're like, well, so then what do you believe? Are you religious? Do you believe in God? And I feel like my answer is sometimes. Sometimes I'm Christian. When I walk by a homeless person and John Piper pops up into my ear and he says, it's better to err on the side of being charitable than to not. Then I reach into my pocket and I give the guy a coin. I'm being pretty fucking evangelical Christian at that point, And John Piper is like the ghost in my ear.
You're only doing it because it makes you happy.
Right, exactly. But that's the point, man. That's what we need. I want to be happy. But so sometimes I'm Christian, and sometimes I'm Buddhist, and sometimes I'm Muslim, I'm sure, although I'm sure my Muslim influences are less than they would be my Buddhist and Christian influences. And sometimes I'm Hindu, and sometimes I'm whatever, and sometimes I'm this and sometimes I'm that. So I'm less interested in the idea of whether or not I believe in God in the way that I think people expect me to answer that question. Because, first of all, I don't think that intellectual assent is akin to actually what belief is. I believe in the power of ideology, and I don't think we really know what we believe. It's what you do, which actually is what you believe. So sometimes I believe in God, but I think really ultimately I'm a polytheist. I think we all are. And
this is the most Austin take ever.
And I think there's something really interesting about being aware of the gods that we worship, and under what conditions do we worship what gods, right? And I think, let's take a typical evangelical Christian who goes to church on Sunday, and they would say, I believe that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. I believe in the triune God, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes you do. Yeah, on Sunday mornings you might, but, maybe Sunday afternoon you believe in the God of the Falcons because you're a football fan. And then on Monday morning you believe in the God of capital because you're a financier and your entire day is driven by you trying to maximize profits for the bank that you work at. Or maybe you work in the music industry and your God is the flow of audio waves, or the gods of audio waves, because even there are probably gods within gods within gods, and we have to think of things like fractally. But so I think Girard, like you said, I like what you said a minute ago. You said the structure or the form of what Girard, not necessarily the content of what he's offering, it helps us kind of think about the world in an interesting way. And I like that.
Yeah, just to follow on what you said about the God of the Falcons, is the God of the Lakers the most Christian God because he's done crucified? And I'm waiting for him to rise, but I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Hey, man, it's only Saturday, okay? It's
Holy
not
Saturday.
Sunday yet.
It's a long-ass Holy Saturday. The God of the Lakers is down in hell right now, bringing up all the prisoners and captives.
That's right.
My issue with Girard, I read half the book that you recommended, the conversation or the reading the Bible with Girard, and scientifically, I kind of feel like it's obviously not good theory, just because it's not it's not scientific method whatsoever. Clearly, it's a lot of confirmation bias involved when you just kind of pick out the points of your text that support your theory and ignore the rest of them, and do the same with the archaic religion ones. And that's fine, right? Right. He's not trying. I don't think he's really trying to be an anthropologist, even though he says that. I think he's being French a little bit right there.
I agree, and he mocks the deconstructionists, but he is kind of playing a little bit with language. I think, totally. In a deconstructive sense, and I don't even think he means to. It's because, like you said, because he's French, because of his education, he can't help it. So he's kind of just playing on that level of, I don't want to say superficiality in a bad way, but actually, I think he's just kind of playing at that level of hyper reality almost. Yeah, totally. And even just the whole idea of Christian supremacy is a little ugly looking back at it now. It's fine to read texts and find differences in them, right? Obviously, there can be a slavery to the common or the natural. If and sociology does this, anthropology does this, philosophy does this, where whatever is the guiding presuppositions of the field handcuffs you, and you can't think creatively. And so we're not anthropologists, but we know that happens in philosophy and other areas as well. So certainly you don't want to fall into that kind of rut. All that said, I think really you don't have to accept the Christian supremacy to say that the Judeo-Christian texts are a little bit different than the majority of the texts of archaic religions that we have, mostly because the circumstances were different, not because the people were inherently more holy or were God's chosen people or anything of those like religious ideas, but because
the unique thing about especially the Jewish texts is they were written by the losers, which is a thing in history that just does not happen very often. If the losers, the small groups, the people who were dominated, got to write the stories of archaic religion in any context, it would be this. It would be like this. And so the Jewish texts are only unique in the respect that it wasn't the Romans and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Egyptians who wrote the stories. It was the losers of all those things. Except, the Canaanites didn't get to write their story, unfortunately.
Right.
But
so then let me ask you this. Extrapolating from that back into history, do you think that maybe what Girard has done is allowed us a lens by which we can look at loser history, so to speak? Like maybe looking at the Jews and the sort of failed expectations of what they were hoping for with this conquering Messiah, and how then the select Jews that viewed Jesus as then being God because of his innocence, and that reversal of the scapegoat. Do you think we would maybe be able to find that historically in the past in other communities that had been crushed by like imperial powers or cultural powers?
Yeah, I mean, to this degree, maybe not. I mean, I don't really know how to speak to that. But I mean, yeah, you can imagine like if you look at like the Vedas, ancient Hindu sacrificial texts, what if the ancient versions of the Untouchables got to write their story instead of the Brahmins writing the story? Maybe you have something similar to the Old Testament prophets. I don't know if any of that exists. I'm obviously not enough of a Hindu scholar to know the history of that well enough.
Right.
And I know that the caste system wasn't the same then as it was in like, the 19th century. But yeah, it does seem to me that he's more finding or speaking to a general sociological difference, an anthropological difference, than really getting to an inherent supremacy of Judeo-Christian ideas of the anti-scapegoat compared to all archaic religions, which are all just the same. It's more of a structural difference, I think it is, than like an individual, unique, supersessionist type difference.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. So basically, he wrote people's history of ancient Roman Empire.
Yeah, maybe Howard Zinn is the contemporary version of
that. Okay, yeah, that's really cool. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about. He's such this is such a rich topic that we could get bogged down into all kinds of things. But there is something I did want to talk to you about that I think maybe comes out of this, that expands from his theory a little bit, that I think is interesting. And this is going to be me just going like weird and complexity chaos shit. But so what I wonder is this idea of the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the sort of, let's say it's the binding victim that allows for a community to emerge and develop, let's say, its own social identity, right? So let's take Group A, and they have the A victim, which will be like A1, right? And then there's Group B, and then they have their victim, B1. And then there's Group C, D, let's go through Z. In the contemporary world in America, we have groups that they're composed of multiple identities. So you aren't just a Christian. You're a Christian, and you're a Republican, and you are a part of the NRA, and you also have your softball league that you play with on Sundays, and your homies from high school, that's part of your community, and maybe you were on the wrestling team, so that's part of your identity. And so we have these intermixing identities, and what I wonder is there a way to complexify Girard and think about scapegoating in a contemporary sense that isn't based on an actual victim that has been murdered, but that there are victims in a sort of more ideological or structural sense? And so, for the football fan, their scapegoats are the players who sacrifice. And that's why we're so interested in their stories. Like, this person, they came from, an impoverished background, and they overcame their thing, and now, they don't drink, and they don't smoke, and they don't party on the weekends, and they sacrifice for us, and they bleed out on the football field. Fuck, the movie Any Given Sunday tries to basically say that football players are like the contemporary gladiators of today, right? And so I wonder if there's a way to kind of look at that in a dispersed sense where all of these communities have some sort of scapegoat, you know, whether it's Mexicans or terrorists or whether it's athletes or whether it's, maybe even media personalities, and you're like, they're the evil ones. They're the ones. And so you're trying to kill them, quote unquote, and that's what binds you and forms your community identity with the other people who also scapegoat that person. But they're not actually committing the crime. They're not actually committing the kill. Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've thought too much about this, although I like the idea of trying to do kind of a mimetic sociological theory of modern society. I mean, Girard says several times, I think, right, that current secular culture in the West is post-Christian, so it still can't really have scapegoats because it would know it's a scapegoat, because it would follow the model of Jesus, and if you know you have a scapegoat, you can't have a scapegoat. It has to be unconscious for it to work.
Right.
And so I think Girard kind of predicts that this society either has to succeed wonderfully and sort of not be violent, or it has to basically destroy itself, because it needs the scapegoat to create peace. And if you can't have a scapegoat because you know the mechanism and how it's unjust, then you basically just you fall apart. It's too foundational contradiction. It's like a crack in the cornerstone, right? It's not going to survive. So, I mean, I actually, as oversimplified as that theory is, it does seem to me kind of interesting that there probably is some evidence of something like that happening in the secular cultures, right? Where, especially the Christian cultures and the more conservative sides that hold fast to that Christian identity have a tendency in the past, 5 or 10 years to be moving much more towards that scapegoating mentality, almost like we need to bring this back. We need to have some foundational inequality or difference between people groups in society and have the violence directed towards the lesser of them so that we can have some foundational unity. We've talked a lot on the podcast about how the alt-right sort of takes a lot of these ideas that leftists produce about the inherent violence in society and wants to weaponize them. Because it agrees and says, those things are correct. We just need to use them. Otherwise, we're dead. We won't last as a society or as an affluent, successful one. And so there is some of that, right? And it seems to me that leftists don't really have any ideas sort of in the grand sphere about what to do with that. I mean, if it's true that society is founded on violence, then is the new right correct to say that, well, then we should just weaponize that? If not, then that means we have to produce some actual ideas about how to found society differently. And, I think we talk a lot about what those ideas are, but it's certainly in the nascent stage.
Well, now, Girard's solution for peace is the imitation of Christ, right? And so he talks about how this idea of imitation, this mimesis, that there's an inherent problem with that because it leads to rivalry, which leads to violence, and ultimately to vengeance, he says, which is the sort of hallmark that separates humans from animals, is that we are driven by that vengeance. And it's that cycle of violence, right? I'm going to blow them up, then they're going to blow us up, then we're going to blow up their children, then they're going to blow up our children, and then it's this endless process. And he says, well, a way out of that is the imitation of Christ, the imitation of the Messiah. And didn't Thomas à Kempis write a book called Imitation? Yeah. And obviously Girard is Catholic, so or at least he converts to Catholicism later in life, right? So there's something interesting probably in that, but there's something interesting in this idea of, okay, we can't break out of imitation. That's who humans are, right? That's kind of like, he calls it original sin. He says that mimetic desire, that's what original sin is, that it is about that imitation. We can't get away from it. So what is the overcoming of that? It's the sort of transvaluation of the things that we imitate. So is there a way, not saying that we imitate the conservative evangelical understanding of the Messiah, but is there a way that imitation of quote-unquote Christ figures or the Messiah as maybe a structural concept, that is sort of useful in programmatic building for overcoming the conflict and violence that characterizes human society.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even just have to be Jesus. I mean, you see, almost like superheroes of sorts in all these circumstances. I mean, you can see Muhammad as being a sort of anti-scapegoat figure, in that in Mecca and Medina, he's basically almost rounded up and murdered because he's promoting monotheism against the cultural polytheism, right? And so he was almost scapegoated, but then pronounced innocent, and God sort of rescues him and delivers him against his enemies. And you could say even Buddha is kind of like that. And there's certainly an imitation aspect in Buddhism that's very strong.
100%.
In Hinduism, all the various incarnations of Krishna are things to be imitated in a respect, right? I mean, the Bhagavad Gita itself is just about a sort of imitation. So yeah, you see this all over the place. And yeah, what seems to me what's interesting is, since we're this secular society today, can we imitate these figures? Can we kind of actively put our mimesis away from the mimetic rivalry aspect and towards imitation of unreal things? Like Girard mentions Don Quixote as an example of this, right? And he's this kind of dumb, naive figure because he wants to emulate the knight hero, right? But it's not a real person he's imitating. It's an ideal. Can we do that knowing full well it's false?
So we're aware that what we're doing is false so that we can produce a real effect.
Exactly. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, I think so. That's what my PhD really is all concerned about, or what's all concerned about. The thesis was all concerned about. So I think so. I think that my documentary, Inventing the Future, based on the book, I think that's one of the things that they talk about, this idea of hyperstition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is the idea, is you're creating these images that are fictitious images, but the purpose is to create true affect in the present, and then true effects, we'll say, in the material sphere. So yeah, I do think it's possible, and I actually think that we're already so mimetic, especially today, because information and media and our consumption of story is so fast and is so dense. I think that we're driven by this mimetic tendency even more than we realize. So like, we watch Wonder Woman, and I think you're going to see a bunch of young girls that are going to become little mini Wonder Womans. That is their Don Quixote that they're imitating. I was talking about this with my girl after we saw Wonder Woman, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but it was before, or maybe it was before. And I said, think about World War I. When you picture it in your mind, do you picture it in black and white or color? And she said black and white. I said, think about the Great Depression, black and white or color? She said black and white. I said, what about World War II? She said color. And I said, that's interesting. Even though, Schindler's List is mostly color, except for like the little touches of red or whatever. But most of the World War II films of recent years, Son of Saul, Boy in the Striped Pajamas, you can even talk about like Inglourious Bastards, they're color. So I think of World War II in color. But here's what's crazy. When I think of the 1800s, black and white. When I think of the American Revolutionary War, it's in color. Why is that? And it's because of paintings that I've seen in American history book, and because of like The Patriot in movies and shit like that. Exactly. In Heath Ledger. Exactly. So when I think of like 14th century Scotland, it's in color. That's fucking weird. That's imitation. That is the effect of imitation on us because of the medium of media and television and film. And so we already are imitating. We're already involved in this game. My interest, and this is why I produce art and I want to continue to do things, and even something like this podcast, is because I think what we're doing is we're producing something that allows for different types of imitative influences. And so to make movies that will create figures and thoughts and concepts and stories and characters that will then affect that mimetic tendency in a way that maybe is a better imitation, that's what I'm interested in. And so I already think we're doing it. We're just not aware of it, maybe in the way that, I don't know, because the ancients probably weren't aware of it either. Yeah, I just don't think we're aware of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about how the hyperstitional stuff is a huge concept for you, and I can see that especially in the Deleuzian circles, right? For me, like, my interest in Meyasu is in large part because of some of these ideas, and how can we think of things that are not the case, and maybe can't be the case under current systems, but could possibly logically be the case. and separating those things out, and maybe having those ideas affect and act on our current ideas. And so that's all really vague and abstract, right? But that's the challenge, right? We sort of have too much knowledge for our own good in modern society, and so do we let that destroy us because we know too much, so it's all just over? Or is there a through line from that to basically saving ourselves, to not destroying ourselves? I mean, obviously we got to think it's that, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. But figuring out how to do that in the idea and creating ideas to do that is sort of what we're interested in doing, right? In the kind of grand scheme of things.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're owls at dawn, motherfuckers. Not owls in the blackness.
Not dusk, yo. By the time it's dusk, we're all dead, so you gotta figure that shit out now.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I think for anyone listening, Rene Girard he's a very complex writer. Any of those literary theorists, they're fucking difficult. Frederick Jameson and Umberto Eco, and anytime you're talking about like that shit, it's always tough. But the book, Reading the Bible with Rene Girard, if you have an interest in theology, if you come out of sort of a Christian background, or even if you're just interested in the history of anthropology of religion, it's an interesting text, and it's really accessible, which is nice because some of his other texts are not very accessible. And I would say check it out. What do you think, Troy? In closing, is there anything else you want to talk about with this? Is there any thought-provoking gems you want to spit out?
I think we addressed it as much as we wanted to.
Cool. Yeah, I think so. All right, sweet. Well, now we are going to transition to the next segment of our podcast. It's called Sticky Leaves. The reason it's called Sticky Leaves is because there's some Dostoevsky novel that I've actually never really read, Brothers Karamazov, and there are these two guys, and one guy believes in God, and the other guy doesn't believe in God, and the one who believes in God says to the one who doesn't believe in God, well, like, if you don't believe in God, how do you find meaning in the world, And the other guy, the atheist, says, well, you know what? It's those sticky leaves on a Sunday morning, or some shit like that. So that's what this segment's all about. It's like, hey, how do you find meaning in a world that is meaningless, where it's just like polytheistic Dianas that are destroying temples and shit like that? So this week it's Troy's turn to talk about what's given him meaning in a meaningless world. T-Roy, what up?
All right, this Sticky Leaves is going to be dark as shit, so just prepare yourself. Trigger warning. Because Sticky Leaves this week is an album that has really affected me the last month or so. It's a album, A Crow Looked at Me by Mount Eerie. Mount Eerie is the sort of stage name of Phil Everham. He's a folk, experimental, tape loop, noise artist. He's been around since the mid-90s. His namesake was the Microphones back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Produced a couple of my favorite albums, The Glow Part 2 and the Mount Eerie album, and then he changed the name to Mount Eerie after that. And he's gone a lot more into the noise realm. He uses lots of tape hiss and other stuff to make interesting ideas. He's a huge guy in the indie scene. And his wife passed away from cancer I think it was about 9 months after having their first child. And they got the news that she had stage 4 and was terminal, like when the baby was a couple months old. And he basically just watched her die, and it became big news on the indie scene because they're both artists, Phil and his wife, and they put I don't know if it was Kickstarter or one of the other ones, GoFundMe I think, for her cancer treatment, and they got to the amount they needed for her chemotherapy treatment, but then she died right after they got to the amount, so they never really got to use it. It's this horrible story, just absolutely terrible. And he kind of disappeared from the scene for a little while, and then he came back. It's been, I think, about a year since she passed, and he releases this album called The Crow Looked at Me. And it's all songs he wrote within the first couple months after she died. And even though he's usually done this kind of noise, experimental stuff, it's all just him and guitar, pretty much. There's a couple of pieces of percussion, a couple lines of bass lines in there, but mostly it's just he and guitar, all recorded. It's all her guitar that he was using. Recorded in their home while the baby was asleep right next to him, he said. So he had to be very quiet when recording so as not to wake the baby up. And it's a devastating album. I mean, the first song is called Real Death, and the first line is just, death is real. it's not to be made into art. And so it's kind of a contradiction at the very beginning. Like, you can't. It's too real. You can't make this into art. You can't transform it. And yet he's doing it anyway because
what else can he do?
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's incredibly heartbreaking because there's very little metaphor. It's very straight and literal, and it's just and the phrase "death is real" is repeated several times throughout the album at just points where you almost like break down. It's very hard to listen to. I mean, it's been such an effective album for me. I've probably listened to it like 7 times, which is not very much. Usually, if I really like an album, I'll listen to it dozens and dozens of times, right, in the first run. But it's just so draining to listen to and to follow along. You can't put it on the background. Like, you have to become engaged in it. Like, there is one brilliant metaphor I wanted to just read here, just kind of give an idea of how the tone of this album is. It's a song called "Forest Fires," where he's talking about a forest fire that devastated, because they live up in like Washington or something, around a bunch of forest area, and there was a forest fire going on, I think, during the time when she died. And he says, "This whole past summer was a lingering heat wave, and I remember late August, our open bedroom window, going through your things with the fan blowing, and the sound of helicopters and the smell of smoke from the forest fire that was growing, billowing just on the edge of town where we used to swim. They say a natural cleansing devastation, burning the understory, erasing trails. There is no end. When I'm kneeling in the heat, throwing out your underwear, the devastation is not natural or good. You do belong here. I reject nature. I disagree." And it's from the song Forest Fires, and go and listen to it if you can deal with that. But it's very harsh. It's almost like attacking the listener a little bit. And I've read some interviews with Elvram, and he said part of it was he wanted to shock people, not for the sake of shock, but just to say death is real, right? This is a real thing, and you have to deal with it, and don't try to pretend you can just, it's a beautiful tragedy. It's not. But at the same time, that can get kind of ugly, right? If it's just this death is real. And he said he wanted to title the album Death is Real at first, because that was the guiding theme, right? But he titled it A Crow Looked at Me instead. So he wanted most of the album to be this like face death straight up, like really look it right in the face and know what it is. But then the last song on the album is called Crow. And he talks about, at the end here, taking his daughter into the forest, basically, right? And it starts with like, he says, "Sweet kid, what is this world we're giving you? Smoldering and fascist with no mother." Which is like him thinking about, I think he said he wrote this right after the election happened, and thinking about all the horrible things that have happened in his own life and then in society, right? But then he's got his daughter, and he's walking along in the forest, and he says there was one crow following them while they're walking along in the forest. And he says, "I walked and you bobbed and dozed. Sweet kid, we were watched and followed, and I thought of Genevieve," that's his wife. "Sweet kid, I heard you murmur in your sleep, crow, you said, crow. And I asked, are you dreaming about a crow? And there she was." And that's the end. And it's totally ambiguous. Like, is he saying that she was reincarnated into a crow? Or is he saying, or like, what the hell's going on? And in some interviews, he had said that he wanted this album to be hopeful, even amidst all the darkness, but he didn't want to say what the hope was, because he doesn't know either. And I thought that was really, really great, because the album just slams you in the face so much. But obviously he wrote the album, and he produced the music, and he thought, I have to do something about this. So there's something there driving us amidst all the darkness. Even if we don't know what it is, it's still there. And trying to find it and explore it is part of the human condition, right? And that's all really... Trying to name it.
Yeah,
try your something best, even in metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to name what that sense is. I love that.
Yeah, and it's really hard because you want to turn it into art and be like, this is a beautiful piece of tragedy. But it's not that, right? It's fighting against that temptation. But at the same time, it sort of speaks to what art can do in using metaphor to get to things that we can't concretely define. It's not beautiful, but it's important. And it's effective. And so I would just recommend anybody out there who, if you ever needed somebody to like share in pain, This is an album that shares in pain. I mean, it's not going to pretend that everything's all right at all. And some people can't deal with that. Like, it will just depress you and make you feel horrible for the rest of the day. For some people, I mean, for me, that kind of thing is incredibly empathetic, and it gives me actually a boost. Not because I enjoy someone suffering, but because I see their humanness in it, and it sort of gives me energy. Like, it propels me to say, you know, if he can do it, so can everybody else.
This is that imitative empathy that can impel and that can be creative and productive that we were kind of hinting at previously. And I love that idea of the crow being a hope that we don't understand what it is. So there's an imitative empathy, and then there's an ambiguous hope that just opens you up to the expanse and the lack of options. You don't have a choice, and if you're alive, you just simply live. You know, that's why I like the idea of life as being the sort of foundation of things, not like energy or biology or human or anything like that. It's just this life as an ambiguous concept. Maybe crow is an equally interesting and productive ambiguous concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a sticky leaf because it's been really important to me the past several weeks. It's not going to be for everybody. So if you know that you're prone to being a Debbie Downer when you have that kind of stuff around you, do not listen to this album because it will ruin your day. But
okay, what's his name again?
His name is Phil Elverum.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mount Eerie is the group name, although it's just him.
Okay. And some of his old stuff you said is kind of funky and rad too, noise stuff. So
yeah.
Like Richard Young's kind of experimental, weird things like that?
It's much more in the indie side. It's like if you like Neutral Milk Hotel. They're kind of the indie darlings of the mid-90s, right?
That was your thing, man.
That was one of my favorite albums of all time. Yeah, his Microphones albums are a little bit like that.
Okay.
Probably more noisy. Listen to The Glow Part 2, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. It's a great one if you're into that kind of thing.
All right. Well, I'm excited. I'm definitely going to check that out. I mean, I'm excited in a weird sort of morose way, but...
Yeah, if you want some song recommendations to check it out without doing the whole thing, Ravens is probably my favorite song on the album. And then probably the most interesting one, in addition to the final song, Crow, which is just a real short one, is Soria Moria, which is a song about Elverum went to Norway, where I guess his ancestors, his name is Norwegian, and he went to the town of Elverum, which is where his last name comes from. And he saw a painting called Soria Moria, I guess, where there's a guy looking at a castle, but it's shrouded in mist. And he uses that as a metaphor to talk about him trying to get to that castle, which is basically getting through grief. But he has no idea how to do it because it's shrouded in mist. So yeah, it's kind of like a Caspar David Friedrich thing. If you know that, what's that painting with the adventurer guy and he's looking up the mountains and it's all shrouded in mist?
Yeah.
It's like that, but more of a dark, tragic thing than a triumphant romantic.
Of idea. Romanticism, yeah, exactly. Interesting. That sounds pretty rad, though, man. I'm definitely going to check it out. I like that sort of thing. I think I even though I am a sort of energetic type of person, I really do enjoy the lows of human experience. I mean, obviously, I don't enjoy tragedy. I don't enjoy I don't like seeing suffer. But I do think there's something powerful in connecting with that feeling and with just kind of sitting in the range of emotions. And when you're sad, feel the sadness. Don't shut it down. And when somebody else is experiencing tragedy, I do think there is something powerful. And I don't want to trivialize it. Like you said, death is the beautiful tragedy. You want to be careful with it. But there is something beautifully tragic about it. And so, yeah, I'm down, man. I'm definitely going to check that shit out. Matter of fact, as soon as we stop recording, I'm going to check that shit out.
Not before you go to dinner, man. There's going to be some somber asshole at dinner.
Nah, man. It'll give me great conversation.
You go to dinner and you'll be like, dudes, the waiter comes up, death is real. I'm going to start class that way tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
Do it.
Death is real.
Just write it. Actually, don't say anything. Just walk in and just write it on the board. Just big. And just sit there and turn around and start playing the album and just stare at them and see what they do.
That's some mimetic violence, man.
Yeah, it is.
All right, right, so for bullshitting this week, I think we're talking a little bit about something very Austin related. Is that true?
I think so.
So what's happening right now that you wanted to talk about for bullshit?
All right. So for people out there who are not combat sports fans, just bear with us because we're going to try to make this as entertaining as possible. But I have spent many years of my life participating in martial arts. I was a huge fan of the Karate Kid when I was a little boy, so obviously I had to take karate classes, and then I started taking judo when I was a little younger, and then I didn't for years, and then in my later teenage years, I started training in mixed martial arts pretty hardcore. And I've done so off and on for, the last, we'll say, like 15 years, where I'll train for 6 months and then I won't for a year, and then I'll train for a year and then I won't for 2 years, and then I'll train really. So, off and on. But I do enjoy the physical activity of the different components that make up mixed martial arts, which are generally stand-up striking. So there's boxing, there's Muay Thai kickboxing, and then there's the traditional martial arts like karate and taekwondo and things like that get incorporated. And then there's wrestling, and then there is submission grappling and jiu-jitsu, and the most notable practice, we'll say, or the most notable discipline is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I enjoy mixed martial arts. And then at the same time, I also grew up watching boxing. Well, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it, whatever. But there is something interesting that's going on in the world of combat sports for people who like combat sports, and I think just stylistically, there's something interesting that hopefully I can get Troy to be theoretically inclined to discuss, and that is that probably the best pound-for-pound boxer of our generation, some say of all time, but a guy by the name of Floyd Mayweather, Floyd Mayweather Jr., is going to be boxing I'm not going to say the best, because I don't think he is the best, but he is the most popular and most notorious, which is also his nickname, mixed martial arts fighter, a guy named Conor McGregor. So this fight's going to be taking place in August, and they're saying it's like the biggest fight in combat sports history. Each of them are going to be getting like 9-figure paydays. So it's going to be massive. I know. And it might be like the biggest pay-per-view event of all time. So it's going to be fucking huge. But the reason it's interesting is because technically, in a very simple sense, they're two different sports. Boxing is different from mixed martial arts. But mixed martial artists, particularly someone like Conor McGregor, who is known for his stand-up, for his striking, they incorporate a lot of boxing. So he spends many, 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 many hours boxing. But the question is can somebody who is an elite athlete in mixed martial arts, can he last in a ring? Can he make it competitive against the guy who's generally considered the best boxer in the world? And not only that, but the type of boxer that Floyd Mayweather is, too, also presents a challenge to any opponent because he's a very defensive-oriented fighter. And so he's very difficult to even hit. So even people that are like, well, McGregor has a puncher's chance, the problem is well, yeah, but everybody has a puncher's chance. And even the greatest boxers of this generation who step in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, they can't hit him. And they're fucking boxers who have been boxing for 30 years, and they can't hit him. So how is this guy who's going to make his first professional boxing event, how is he going to be able to make it competitive against this guy? So, there's some interest. Is it possible?
Are they playing by the boxing rules or the MMA rules?
Boxing rules, boxing gloves, and there's actually written in the contract that if McGregor busts out any of his MMA moves, if he's just like, fuck this, I'm actually a better fighter than you, just in the well-rounded sense, if he tries to kick him or take him down or elbow him or anything like that, then he loses his money or he gets fined severely, and he would probably face some sort of lawsuit anyway. So yeah, they've made it so that this is a boxing match.
McGregor should just say fuck it and just beat the shit out of him on live TV.
I know, how funny.
That would be so awesome. It'd be worth every penny, right? Because isn't Mayweather I don't want to speak out of turn. Isn't he a felon? He beat his wife or girlfriend or something?
Yeah, big time domestic abuse. I think he spent some time in prison for it.
Yeah, is McGregor a bad dude?
I mean,
also?
A bad dude in what way? I mean, he's presented, from what we understand, he's presented as a guy from a poor part of Dublin. He's from this area called Crumlin in Dublin, which is a pretty gang-heavy, poor part of Dublin, and who's worked his way up. He's been with his same girlfriend for 12 years or something like that, and they just had a kid, and so he's portrayed as a good guy. I'll just say that, even though I know some people that
totally beat the shit out of Mayweather on live TV. The lawsuit fees would be paid for by his fans, right?
Yeah,
he's a huge He's got a huge legion of fans.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Could you
You
imagine?
can GoFundMe his lawsuit.
Yeah, could you imagine if he just like goes in there and he starts like losing in a boxing match and he's like, "Hey, guess what? Remember how I told you I was a better fighter than you just in general as a fighter? Yeah, I'm going to just beat your ass now."
That would be great. I mean, yeah, that's some heavy mimetic violence also. Scapegoating.
Exactly. Hey, man, combat sports is like the essence of what all sports are. Like all sports are just metaphors for what combat sports essentially are. And since we don't do like gladiatorial challenges where people kill each other, combat sports is about as close as it gets for us. So that's how we...
Nah, except basketball, man.
No way.
Basketball is the dance of the angels.
It is not, man. It is the metaphor of metaphors. Oh, man. But yeah, so the thing I think is interesting, though, is you listen to sports commentators and the analogies they're trying to use to compare. There's some people like Max Kellerman, who is a boxing expert. He is. That's kind of his forte, right? He says that there is a 0% chance that Conor McGregor wins. And then you get people who are mixed martial arts analysts who say, yeah, you're right that Mayweather has a great chance to win, but McGregor is a different beast. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's more awkward, he creates distance in a different way, so he could land a punch that could change things. You never know. In a fight, you never know. So you can't say it's a 0% chance. And then you get all these analogies, and they're like, the reason it's a 0% chance is because it's like saying, well, you can't take like the greatest basketball player and put them on a football field and have him and expect him to compete. It won't happen. And I just think all those analogies are bullshit. You know, that's not the same, because in mixed martial arts, you do spend a considerable amount of time boxing. And many of these mixed martial artists I've also fought in the amateurs or things like that. And I don't remember what circuit it was, but I know that McGregor did fight in Europe in boxing quite a bit before he was a mixed martial arts fighter. So it's not quite an accurate analogy, you know?
What would be a better analogy then?
So Max Kellerman gave an analogy that I thought was decent. He said it would be like taking a water polo player and having a water polo player race Michael Phelps. And I thought that was almost there, but probably the best analogy would be like a triathlete or like a heptathlete or a pentathlete, and saying, okay, instead of doing everything, you're just going to run the 100-meter sprint. Or you're going to against the 100-meter sprinter. Against
Usain Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. Or it would be like you're going to do the high jump against the world record holder in high jump. You know, because they do the high jump. That's an event that they do, but it obviously isn't the only thing they do. It isn't the sole thing that they do. So now, with that said, with that analogy, when you look at a pentathlon and a heptathlon, the scores that they get in their individual events, they aren't as good as the athletes who simply specialize. So someone like Jessica Ennis, for example, who's one of the best, pentathletes in the world, her scores in the high jump and the triple jump and the long jump and whatever the running events that she does, they're not as good as the person who is like the world record holder in that event, in the individual event. So that's probably the best analogy, and I think it also shows maybe the distance the best too between the two. But at the same time, it's a fight, man. You never know. You never know.
When is the fight?
August 26th, I think.
Okay, so what's your prediction? Put it on a record right now.
Okay, here's my prediction. I think that McGregor is going to learn really quickly what a high-level boxer is. I think that he's going to have a very difficult time putting his hands on Mayweather. I think that Mayweather's going to turn a show out of it because Mayweather wants to make that money, and he doesn't want to be a laughingstock. And so I think he's going to allow McGregor to be competitive. And then I think that when Mayweather decides that Conor will no longer touch him, I think the rest of the fight will just be him being the defensive genius that he is. And I don't think Conor will be able to touch him. He won't get knocked out. There won't be a knockout. It won't be an exciting fight. It's actually probably going to be a pretty shitty fight. But the build-up is going to be fun. And I think that is what's going to make this an interesting event. You know, it's like when Muhammad Ali fought that fucking wrestler back decades and decades ago. It's not going to be a competitive fight. It's just a spectacle.
Isn't I don't know anything about boxing, but from what I remember, isn't Mayweather's thing that he just he wins like by attrition?
I wouldn't say by attrition. He is He's a defensive fighter. So what he does is he'll shell up where he takes his shoulder and he puts it on his chin, and his hand is actually low. His lead hand is actually low, so it looks like you might have a target. But he does that because he's much more maneuverable to get away from the oncoming attack. And then he'll counterpunch. So someone will try to punch and they'll look fucking silly because they'll be punching at air. And then he'll earn points by 1, 2, 3, 4 combinations. And he can knock somebody out. He doesn't do it often, but obviously he's got power. But it's not his style to make it where it's going to be a brawl. So he will make McGregor miss. He will make him – I mean, one of the best fighters in the world, Canelo Alvarez, who they fought a couple years ago when Canelo was a little bit younger, and he's better now. But still, he made Canelo Alvarez look like an amateur sometimes. He was punching at air, literally to the point where he's like spinning, you know? So he makes even the best fighters look like they like they don't belong in the ring with him.
So, like, to use an analogy, he's like the San Antonio Spurs, like fundamentally sound and defensively minded.
Yes.
And very slow, not fast-paced, but then picks you apart slowly.
Yeah.
And, or to use like a baseball analogy, he hits way more singles and doubles and steals bases opportunistically but doesn't hit 3-run homers.
That's right. He's a small ball player. That's exactly right. Yeah, and he's not gonna hit those homers. And it may be boring, but, solid pitching, lots of singles, and stolen bases and shit like that. It can get you to the playoffs. So,
all right, well, my prediction is McGregor beats the shit out of him on live TV, and we all celebrate it. So we'll see who's right.
I think it'd be freaking awesome if he did, though, for real. If he just – one of the boxing analysts, a guy named Teddy Atlas, he actually said this months ago before the fight was actually agreed upon. He said if it does happen, he's like, I think McGregor will just, like, throw him, just do, like, some sort of, like, toss.
Just pick him up and throw him outside the ring. He would be a hero for all time.
I know. That's
like, okay, Achilles was willing to die for his legacy, knowing if he killed Hector, he would die in the ensuing battle, right?
Yeah.
Think about do you want to be Achilles, or do you want to be some no-name schmuck who lost to a wife-beaten asshole?
That's right. Do you want to win, or do you want to be a legend?
Yes.
I love it.
Your name will echo in eternity.
It would, too. It absolutely would. Fuck, that's what I hope happens. That's absolutely what I hope happens.
All right, we throwing it to Mike?
Yeah, let's do it.
Who's in L.A. now, I hear. Is that correct?
He is indeed in L.A. Yeah. Getting his improv and music and writing life on.
All right, let's see if that colors the This Week in Hip Hop a little more.
Michael, what's going on?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up, Owls of Dawn? It's This Week in Hip Hop with Michael Burns. Damn, it's a good week. I think it was getting a little slow for a while. It's probably reflected in my middle grade enthusiasm for some music, but we got two really good things to talk about. I'm sure that most of you have listened to or at least heard about both of these things, so hopefully you'll have some frame of reference. But first, we'll get right to it. Vince Staples' Big Fish Theory came out. Damn, it's good. I think there's been a lot of talk already about how this might be in contention for Album of the Year. It's always kind of dumb to have those conversations halfway through the year, but man, I'd be shocked if this didn't end up in a lot of people's top 10, maybe top 5. One of the most interesting things about the Staples record is that I think the production takes a very different path than what a lot of people would have assumed, expected, or even wanted. There's a lot of UK garage, or if we're going to be official, garage influence, and the influence of a lot of, or at least the sound of the influence of a lot of contemporary beat music and electronic music coming out of the UK. So you kind of get that garage sound in certain tracks, and then the influence of kind of that underground dubsteppy sound on some other tracks. I'm sure a lot of this relates to, as well, the fact that the production comes from a team that is steeped in LA's low-end theory scene. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But either way, so that's been a really fun part of this record, what's going on musically, and I think this music reflects what's going on lyrically. A lot of the UK stuff has this darkness that reflects a certain context and content, and we see that lyrically. Like the lyrics offer a kind of juxtaposition with the Vince Staples of Twitter and, popping up on ESPN or various interviews, where he's often really funny and sarcastic and all sort of shit. He gives us a worldview in these lyrics that is fundamentally pessimistic, filled with despair. And he's even said in some interviews, like, why am I going to rap about happy shit when I look around the world and it's terrible? And what makes it a hard listen at times is that he's usually right. Like, when Vince Staples talks about how fucked up the world is, it's very hard to find arguments against that. So it can be an intense listen. This isn't like a turn-up record by any stretch of the imagination. I think he really does more with less lyrically as well. The structures of his verses never feel crammed or forced, like he's trying to jam syllables in or do some sort of lyrical gymnastics. He sounds very confident and relaxed with getting the message across. Standout tracks, I like a lot of them. 745, maybe my favorite. A smooth song, really fucking sad and introspective. It's not often that we have like a legitimately sad rap song. I think this is one. The production on that one is reminiscent of kind of an Oakland sound, because you get that heavy synth bass that can remind you of some of the hyphier stuff out there. The 745 is great. Yeah, Right, I really like. I think Yeah Right's the song where Long Beach and like South London get together most obviously. It's a sort of beat that you could have imagined like pre-pop music, Dizzy Rascal jumping on. And while it's not a club song, I don't know, I could see listening to Yeah Right before I like threw the brick through the window of a bank or something. So, I mean, Owls at Dawn doesn't recommend that, but if you're going to do it, there's a soundtrack for it. And then the final track on the record, which I love, Rain Come Down, has Ty Dolla $ign assisting on the hook, someone I've really grown to love. So, final words on this one. There's no reason you shouldn't listen to this record. And let's just hear a quick clip of Rain Come Down.
I'm the man 10,000 the street on the blood, on the leaves, on the nose, and the sphinx. One friend, we don't go to police. One friend, we don't run, we just roll with the heat. I'm the back of the bus, take a seat, take a ride on the side while we down the street. And the cops don't come for some weeks. No, the cops don't come for some weeks.
Okay, now the other thing that came out this week, and this one was unexpected. There was a lot of hype around this project in the last week. Jay-Z, you might have heard of him, governor named Sean Carter, Mr. Beyonce Knowles, put out a record called 444. It's 10 tracks. It's produced completely by No ID, legendary producer. If you don't know him, look him up. Dummy. So let's talk about what this record is not. And I think this is really important. This record is not the first grown man rap album. People saying that are fucking dumb. It's not Jay-Z's best record. It's not the male counterpart to Lemonade. It's not a diss record firing shots at young rappers and Kanye. It doesn't represent some political pro-black turn in Jay-Z's lyrics. What it is a really strong record by one of the best rappers who's ever touched a microphone, who is showing us how he is aging and progressing as an artist. This record shows Jay-Z has become comfortable rapping not from the perspective of his past, because we know there's nothing lamer than like a 40-year-old rapping about shit they did when they were 22. It's not fun. But rather, we get the perspective of him in the present, which is a multimillionaire husband and father of two who's been through a lot and seen a lot. And when he is looking backwards on this record, whether it's looking backwards to shit in his personal life or his early career or his family, it's not like basking in the glory of his hustling days, or, this isn't Jay-Z as the 47-year-old guy at the neighborhood bar that still talks about the touchdown he threw at the homecoming game in 1979 like a fucking asshole. He's evaluating the past with the benefit of time and perspective. This is Jay-Z kind of looking back, not saying he's a fucking know-it-all, but he's able to look back and question some things that happened and learn going forward. And it's really honest. And while it's not the first grown man record, it's an honest and vulnerable record for Jay-Z. Now, some have said that, like, it's stupid that all a man has to do is express some regret to be considered vulnerable. And yeah, it's stupid, okay? I get it. Smash the patriarchy and shit. But also respect his agency. One thing that stood out more than anything is that the production is fucking phenomenal on this record. No ID, out of Chicago, the person that first mentored Kanye and brought Kanye into Jay-Z's fold. Damn it, it's so good. Like, every track is good. Every track is doing something different. People have been talking on rap Twitter about the influence of Dilla popping up. I think that's definitely there. But that's the strongest part of this, because you can listen to the 10 tracks all the way through, and while there's some lyrical flaws and some corniness from Jay-Z throughout, No ID paints such a beautiful musical backdrop that it makes the process awesome. And you know, shouts to anyone who just makes a 10-song record, keeps it quick, to the point. I won't even say like best tracks, but like best beats. I love 444, and the repetition of the vocal sample when it really hits is just insane. Bam, or Bomb, depending on how you want to say it. Really fun flip on the Sister Nancy sample used by Kanye. Maybe there's some subliminal stuff going on there. Maybe it's not. I don't want to fan the flames, because I'm sure Kanye West listens to this podcast. Legacy, as well, one of the final tracks on the record. Man, this one's good. And it's really reminiscent of a late era Dilla with the kind of minimalism and jazzy sample. It makes you think about Donuts era when he was doing a lot with a little. But yeah, there's really no reason you shouldn't get this. I know it's hard to access right now because it's like Sprint and Tidal and the Illuminati and Steve Jobs and shit have all gotten together to make this exclusive. Just like ask someone, they'll put it in a Dropbox folder for you. Someone did that to me. Shouts to Matty Reyes. But get a hold of this one. It's really good. And don't listen to everyone trying to make this some goddamn point for argument. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, the record dropped the other night, and late night rap Twitter was beautiful, because you had all these brilliant writers and fans of hip-hop kind of just having fun with the fact that we are getting a good Jay-Z produced by No ID record in 2017. And it was great. It made me really happy. Happy to be a hip-hop fan. Next day I get on Twitter, and the regular internet got a hold of it, and god damn it, the takes of a bunch of, and I say this as a white guy, but the takes of like a bunch of largely progressive white people getting their hands on this record was so fucking stupid. And there's a certain type of rap fan that started listening to rap in like 2013 that pontificates like a fucking asshole now. It's so goddamn stupid. So if you are that person, maybe check yourself a little bit and know that you might not understand the whole history and culture behind this music, and that's fine, but like, we don't need your hot take. So I've learned now, if you want good rap Twitter, get on there real early. So to play us out today, let's listen to a little bit of 444, and we'll be back next week with a lot of other stuff that happened this week that I didn't have time to get to. So this is This Week in Hip Hop on Hours of Dawn with Michael Burns. Stay safe. Bye.
I apologize, often womanized. Took for my child to be born, see through a woman's eyes. Took for these natural twins to believe in miracles. Took me too long for this song, I don't deserve you. I harass you out in Paris. Please come back to Rome, you make it home. We talked for hours when you were on tour. Please pick up the phone, pick up the phone.
Alright, thanks for that, Michael. You listen to Big Fish Theory, Austin?
Big Fish Theory. Is that the name of the album?
Vince Staples?
Oh, I see. I didn't know the name of the album. I didn't think it... Big Fish Theory. It sounds like a Tim Burton film. Okay, so I didn't listen to the whole album, but I listened to the track that Michael recommended for the week, and I dug it. It's really good.
Rain Come Down?
Yeah, it's really good, man. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a great track.
Now, you were really excited about this album coming out, so are you stoked on it or what?
I want to lie and say I've listened to it on repeat since it came out, but I have not, since it's finals week of the summer. And
okay.
We're getting ready to come and visit Austin.
Yeah.
In Ireland.
Yeah.
Next week. Just heads up, everyone, the podcast.
Yeah.
Your two favorite podcasters are going to be in the same town for the first time in months.
Yeah. So it's not that you haven't been listening to it because you're not stoked on it. It's just purely a time thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking over the next few days I'm going to be putting that on while I'm grading papers and stuff, getting ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you out of your funk after listening to Mount Eerie for the past, like, week or so?
No, that's going to stay with me forever, man.
Oh, fuck.
That's like some hauntology stuff right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That first song, if you just jump right into that first song, it's going to make you cry. Especially when...
What, Real Death?
Yeah, when he just goes to the end about the package that came to the door and how he fell to his knees and wailed. I was like literally, dude. I
my God.
Crying. I'm not kidding. I literally cried. Like, not just like teary-eyed, tear streamed down my face. I was like, what the fuck? This is terrible. Thanks for the recommendation, dude.
Dude talks about his wife dying and then a package coming later that she had ordered before she died. Like, dude, I mean, that's just holy shit. What do you even do with that?
And it was this package that she had purchased in advance for when her daughter started school because she was thinking ahead, and he said that he just collapses on the porch. It's like, yeah. So I feel like a little Vince Staples and Jay-Z, even though they're not exactly – I mean, it's not exactly like upbeat stuff. They're still talking about serious shit, but fuck, man.
You get your blood pumping at least.
Exactly. Have you been able to access any of the Jay-Z stuff? Because there's that one song, right? The OJ one that everyone is freaking out about.
Yeah.
That one's
yeah. I mean, yeah. Have you heard it?
I listened to a little bit of it and I watched a little bit of the video. Just like someone posted it on Twitter, and I think I just watched a little bit of it.
Yeah, I haven't heard any of it, but I don't know. I'm not huge on Jay-Z. I love like Reasonable Doubt and stuff back in the day. That album is incredible. But you know, the last couple like Magna Carta and and all that stuff, I'm not too into it. But yeah, I'll give it. I'll check it out for sure. I mean, if it's Jay-Z, you got to at least give it a listen.
Right. Well, that sounds good. I mean, at least this week people have recommendations for a variety of different types of music. You know, you can go down the indie darkness, and then you can kind of get some sort of more transcontinental beats with the Vince Staples. You know, a little bit of like English garage, as Michael was saying, and then a little bit of that LA stuff in there too. And then you got the old guy coming in. So, yeah, good fun this week, huh?
Yeah, and if you want another recommendation, album I've been listening to lately is Perfume Genius's No Shape. If you're into gay pop,
what's gay
this
pop?
is the way to do it. I just created that name right now.
Oh.
It's like, you know how K-pop is like, you know, Korean pop and J-pop is Japanese pop? What about gay pop?
What's gay pop?
It's like it's just really, really gay.
Oh. Okay, I thought it was going to be like from Georgia or something like that. All right, what is it called?
No, it's really, really gay. It's really, really gay, and really, really good.
Okay, that sounds good.
This guy is like, I forget his name, Mike something or other, and he's goes under the name Perfume Genius, and he writes it's really, really kind of sophisticated, like sophistopop, but it's I think he's transgender. It's kind of like really, really upfront with the you know, non-binary stuff.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting, and you know, it's pop, but it's not simplistic or anything. I really enjoy it.
Shit, what's it?
So you're listening to little chill out music, you know, relax, getting your romantic side, maybe fuck a dude. Then it's a Perfume Genius, and the album is No Shape.
Okay, interesting. So we're gonna get people down into the lows of the lows. Then we're gonna get them to want to go to like a club, and then they're gonna end the night when they're fucked up with gay pop, just like dancing on a table and fucking just slamming down tequila shots and living that West Hollywood life, yeah?
The gay pop's more like put the candles on, and get some wine, and just kind of do a little slow dance.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like that kind of gay pop.
Oh, okay. Actually, that sounds like I'd be kind of down for some of that stuff. I'm kind of down for it. Cool. So we got all kinds of recommendations, all kinds of stuff. And go see Wonder Woman. Okay, so thank you for tuning in to this week of Owls at Dawn. You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram, owls_at_dawn. You can email us, owlsatdawnpodcast@gmail.com. And I believe we'll have one more episode out before Troy is out here, and then there might be a little bit of a lag while Troy is out here. And he's doing Iceland, and then he's doing Ireland, so he's going to be on holidays. But we will have this episode out, and then we will have one more out over the next week. So other than that, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, Troy?
Yeah, as always, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Really appreciate it. And hopefully, after this whole trip has commenced, we will have a sticky leaf for you and not a shitty minute. May your life be a sticky leaf and not a shitty minute.
Yeah.
До свидания, Amerikanski.